welcome to the new episode of Fullfunnel Live. I'm personally super excited about this one because I missed all the episodes in January, and it's good to come finally back. And today we have a special guest, Kaross. She is a global marketing communication manager at our client Certn, and we are going to talk all things about account-based marketing content strategy. Quite often, when it comes to ABM, we invite ABM leads or somebody from sales talking about account development, engagement, different ABM playbooks, etc. But we rarely speak about content. And from my perception, ABM, or let's say account-based content, is one of the most undervalued areas, despite the fact that this is one of the most important areas, right? Because you use content everywhere. You nurture target accounts, you create account awareness with the content, then you proceed with account-specific content to motivate account, even to talk to you, right? That happens way before they decide that they have a buy-in need, right? And then you have one-on-one fully personalized content when account joins the sales, let's say, or the buying process, depending on how you treat it, right? So that being said, we just finished a pilot ABM program with Certn, where Ellen had a huge impact on the content side. And we are going to talk about all things related to content. Welcome, Ellen. Welcome, Vlad. I think the best way to kick it off would be if you very quickly introduce yourself, Certn, your ideal customer profile, and product briefly, just to give context for everybody.
Sure. Okay. I'm excited to chat, and certainly jump in if you think that there's something that I'm missing that you want to hone in on, given that we worked so closely together. So I lead marketing and communications here at Certn. When I first joined, my portfolio primarily consisted of content marketing and SEO-focused content, though it's broadened over the years to also include client communications and PR, which are skills that I bring from other roles I've done in the past. Certn is an online background check company. We're headquartered in Canada, though we have global offices in the UK and Australia. That alone keeps our marketing team busy, though we also have a very broad product offering. So we provide services ranging from online criminal record checks to identity verification, to employment verification, to social media screening. The list really goes on and on. In terms of our ideal client, our ideal buyer persona, given that in North America in particular, 90 to 95% of employers require a background check as a precondition of a formal offer of employment. We primarily work with HR folks, so those senior manager and director level decision makers on HR teams. So sometimes that takes the form of a recruiter, someone in talent acquisition, even people operations. So it really depends on the company. Though, as you mentioned, this was a pilot program. And in this instance, we also honed in on tech companies in the US, given our desire to grow our awareness among that audience.
All right. So you're already kind of touching upon that, moving from more the kind of SEO content, maybe a bit of also product marketing content. I'm interested from your perspective to hear, what do you believe are the biggest differences between, let's say, content for the ABM and account-based marketing strategy versus content that you were creating before in other roles for other companies, let's say more general B2B content? What are the main changes in the content, and how do you think about that?
Oh, goodness. Okay, so I guess something else to highlight that was special or unique for me as part of this process is that when I engage with our sales team, it's often mediated through other colleagues. So working on product campaigns through direction from our product marketer, engaging with sales in events, but again, mediated through the person on our marketing team who manages that. So this was a little bit of a unique experience in that I had a lot more one-to-one direct experience working with sales. Not to say that marketing and sales are totally siloed within our company, but just for me personally, in terms of those personal relationships, at its heart, ABM is relationship focused, right? There's a real emphasis on building trust, building rapport, that one-to-one, hyper-personalized, hyper-targeted approach. I referenced PR before, client communications. That's more of your one-to-many messaging. Corporate communications is more of that, ladies and gentlemen, that it's at a higher level. Whereas in order for an ABM program to be successful, for any sales, really, I think you need to really drill down and be more specific. I'm fortunate in that our business is so specialized. Background screening is highly regulated. It's a very niche service. So as part of any content marketing I've done in the past, I had to do quite a bit of research, but this program in particular, the ABM content, it really demanded a higher level of rigor, a higher level of specificity in order to really create that sense of credibility.
Love it. Thank you. By the way, quick question to you guys. Where are you all tuning in from? I saw a couple of people from South Carolina, Caroline, probably you call it, right? South Africa, Czech Republic, Netherlands. Where are you all joining us from? Let us know in the chat. Curious to see what is our geography today. Kansas. Nice to see you, Lance. So probably the audience from United States will dominate. Sally from Seattle. Good to see you, Sally, again. Cool. So that being said, just even from the surface definition, it's very, let's say, account-based content strategy is very different from the standard approach, right? I would love to dive a little bit deeper into the process of ABM content strategy development. Like you said, there is one-to-many content, one-to-few, one-to-one, right? And the content creation itself requires a close and very tight collaboration with ABM lead, with sales, and with subject matter experts, especially in case if, let's say, if you as a content marketer, you don't have enough domain expertise, so you can't provide, enough, let's say, proof points to everything that you write. So from that perspective, I would love to dive deeper and ask, first of all, maybe it's a simple question, but I would love to hear your perspective. Yeah. So what are the goals of account-based content strategy? Or let's rephrase it into what specific challenges we solve with ABM content?
Oh, goodness. Okay. I think I touched on this briefly before, but the building rapport, building trust, I think that is a key hallmark that differentiates ABM content from standard marketing content. I think you always endeavor to make your customer or prospective customer feel seen in your content. That's the hallmark of great marketing, right? That's what we're all striving to do. That's why we do all of the audience research that we do. That's why we create the personas and try to live and breathe those client communities. That's why we show up at events, all of those things. On the ABM side, I think there's an added level of technical proficiency, really understanding the business process. Folks in sales, perhaps this is more of a part of their day-to-day, really trying to understand what steps need to be in place for the buyer to make that buying decision. So I would say that on my end, that was a bit of the challenge. So not only just doing the audience research, not only engaging SMEs, not only coming up with those workflows to make sure that the content was reflective of that intention, but then also understanding the broader business environment. B2B sales obviously has a long buying cycle. Tech is a little bit different. The tech audiences that we were targeting, that we continue to target, they have a little bit of a faster cycle than perhaps some other products and services. But they also, those are very discerning clients. Those are discerning customers. So again, I would say that trying to hone in on like what their process is, what technical information they really need to create that credibility was a big part of the challenge. And I think what I really appreciated about working with your team at Fullfunnel is that we were able to create those kinds of workflows that unearthed those nuggets that we could then integrate into the content.
So if I hear that right, the first thing is you're working with sales, helping them to build trust with target accounts, with target buyers. I remember when we started the project, we had a chat with sales, and since the company is international, had presence in a lot of markets, one of the challenges was building awareness within those specific target accounts that we have decided to go after, this specific segment of tech companies, et cetera, in North America, in United States. And then we even like honed in, as you were explaining, on very specific company size, company people who are in the company, the type of buyer within the company. And these were kind of the driving goals for us, so that on the one hand, we create that awareness, like you said, trust, and then also very specifically trust of in the salespeople as well, because we used a lot the content that you have produced to enable some of our salespeople who were sharing some of that content on LinkedIn. The buyers were being exposed to that content. It made it so much easier for them to change the perception of, I'm yet another sales rep knocking on your door and trying to get your attention and book a meeting and sell you something, to more of a trusted advisor or somebody who is actually interested in what's going on at the buyer side, like you said, like building that trust. So when we have to achieve those goals, you were mentioning audience research, you were mentioning buyer persona is what we are using frequently within B2B content marketing, just as in general. And I was just wondering, like, in addition to buyer personas, that sometimes, depending on how teams think about it, can be kind of generic, or can be maybe a common denominator between the different types of buyers. I wonder, like, what do you do? What do you use in addition to maybe personas, or how does that change within an account-based marketing strategy?
That's a great question. Yeah, again, ABM demands, in my opinion, a higher degree of rigor. So to your point, those personas, they may be a useful starting point when we're thinking of a more generic, always on campaign. Again, not to discredit that work. That takes a lot of work to interview folks and compile insights and to build that persona. But when it comes to ABM and really trying to demonstrate, a certain level of proficiency, and again, to build that rapport, build that trust, that segmentation work up front. So if I think of the way we started, so the account segmentation, the account research, and then thinking of that valuable content, that educational content, that insights and thought leadership content, that, you You can certainly churn out that content using AI or writing something generic. But I think in order to really shine or to really convince people that you know what you're talking about and to really earn the trust of your salespeople, digging deeper, refreshing, going back to your own data. What have you surfaced lately? What are third-party researchers saying? What are those macro trends affecting folks? And then based on conversations with SMEs within your organization, how are those macro trends influencing buyers these days? What are the new objections perhaps that have come up, or what's that unique perspective of that buyer persona? It feels cheap to keep coming back and saying like rigor, more detail, but there's just a higher level of scrutiny. This program really held me to account. I really felt like in order to feel like I was doing a good job, I really had to dot my I's and cross my T's. Whereas, if you're just churning out your social media post to promote one of your usual product offerings or just sending over some key messages to enable your client success team, it doesn't always require that same degree of pre-vetting or research or constant communications with sales. This process was so iterative, and I'm accustomed to being given my brief and doing my work and going off and engaging with folks as necessary, but then it's kind of, okay, that's done, on to the next thing. Whereas there's a continuous feedback loop in a well-functioning ABM program that I feel as though your team really helped us facilitate, and that is really distinct from some other marketing projects I'd worked on in the past.
Love it. Thank you so much. Before we'll touch, let's say, the content planning approach, because I saw a couple of questions from our community when they signed up for this event about how to plan the content properly. What is the right mix between, let's say, one-to-many, the content that is applied to broader set of accounts compared to one-on-one? I would love to ask you one follow-up question about account research. You mentioned it a couple of times, right? And obviously, in our ABM program, we had a sales rep who was in charge of account research. We established the process. We defined together what insights the sales rep should bring back to you, right? And also explain to you these insights. And then all together, we created so-called account love letter development, right? So writing about specific accounts to raise that brand awareness. Why I'm touching this? I saw two questions from Nicole Dicheva and from Sonia Bailey, and both of them asked how basically to leverage this account research insights. Can you give a post example, right? So how, like, as a content marketer, can I leverage what sales shared to me? So if you can just cover your experience, that would be fantastic. And that collaboration with sales.
Yeah, actually, I guess it's apropos that we mentioned account love letters in the month of February. I'm glad you brought that up, I think. How seasonally appropriate.
Exactly.
So, yeah, I think that was an interesting tactic, one that we honestly hadn't employed before. And I think it's a good example of making apparent some of the things that you do as a content marketer, just as part of your day-to-day. So, of course, I'm looking at what our target audience is putting out there. Of course, I'm reading their newsletters or downloading their reports, checking their press and media center and their social media accounts to see what announcements they've recently made. Those are all part of, I think, a marketer's toolkit. But when it comes to the account love letter, we used it as a tactic to showcase that expertise and showcase that intel in a public forum. So in our case, we crafted account love letters for our sales lead, or the person participating in the pilot, to put up on his personal LinkedIn accounts. So using our internal sales tools, that's how we established who we were going to go after. So who was engaging with our material, our content, visiting our website. From there, that's that's how the short list was created, and it was refreshed frequently. So it may have been the case that we had, a few accounts in mind at the start of the week, but as things evolved, we would move up companies in the priority list or change up the content schedule based on what we were seeing in our tracking data. And so I think that input was instrumental. Like, who are the eyeballs on our website? Who are the eyeballs? Like, who's in the pipeline? Those inputs help me in terms of the scheduling. So who gets their love letter first? Who gets moved to the top of the queue? I did my usual marketer research that I would do. But then I think what made the magic happen was then tapping sales, having those more, again, like those continuous feedback loops, but also shortening it. So being in more constant contact with sales. Okay, you heard this just the other day. In this DM exchange with someone yesterday or this morning, they said this. Okay, let's add this concept into the love letter. So not only did this process create a better feedback loop for me or expose me to a new way of receiving feedback, it almost felt like it was in real time in some instances, because we worked together so closely and so much more frequently that I was able to adjust things that I may have taken longer to figure out. It may have taken me longer to incorporate a certain concept or idea or to phrase something differently if I didn't have the benefit of repurposing LinkedIn content, repurposing LinkedIn comments rather, seeing the actual transcripts of what was going down in someone's DM or email. So yeah, I feel really fortunate that we established a workflow associated with that work product, because I think without that different workflow, the product would maybe be more of a like standard content marketing play, but we infuse something different.
So I love the fact that you were collaborating with sales to the level of individual accounts, the level of account prioritization, so you could decide, okay, who gets the priority in terms of the account love letters, as we call them, time appropriately. But it sounds like, to me, there were a lot of changes in the way that you were planning, and a lot of changes in the way that you were in your workflow. So what I think could be very helpful for people's content marketers, if you could just walk us through, or step by step, how you were actually organizing and planning, from how you were deciding what to write about, which pieces of content to create, and just like the whole workflow around content planning. I think it might be helpful, because it sounds like it was different than what you were doing in the past, or in other, maybe also in the present.
At the same time,
yeah. Because you are, of course, wearing different hats like everybody else.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, the do more with less, or wearing multiple hats, is certainly at a startup. There's no way around that, right? So when I talk about the other process, it's happening in tandem on other projects. This is a funny question to me. It's a great question, but it's a funny question because I'm almost a bit nervous to reveal how my mind works. So as Andre can attest to, I'm a big proponent of batching content. It's one of the ways that I can manage my workflow. So when I actually first set out, when I first started participating in this program, and when we first started conceiving of the program and putting things in motion, I dedicated a few in-depth days to do my usual content marketer workflow, combing through Reddit threads, looking in LinkedIn comments, using the search bar on LinkedIn as a Google search to surface what kinds of conversations were happening around particular topics. Again, all of that, the usual marketing intel. And I actually drafted some posts thinking, okay, we're loosely going to talk about these themes, or this is what I know to date. You know, I know this about our HR persona. This is what I know about our buyers. This is what I can intuit about a tech buyer in the US. And I started to draft content, and I batched quite a bit of it, which was a very worthwhile endeavor. It was all in service of other work that I was doing as well. But then when it came down to it, actually, I think success in ABM, and this is where, perhaps we can have a debate about how worthwhile it is to automate these processes, or where AI could play a role. My perception, based on doing this, is that you really do need to carve out that time for more real-time iteration. Like it really needs to be a living, breathing thing. And I don't really believe that a successful ABM program can be just batched at one time and then delivered in another time. So I would use Intel. We established a weekly check-in, a weekly sync with sales and other participants in marketing to go over, here's what we extracted from 6 Sense, here's what we're seeing in on the sales data side. And we would have real-time conversations about, I think we should prioritize this account over this one, or let's actually hone in on this given X, Y, and Z. We want to talk about candidate experience, but this particular topic is a little bit sticky right now on account of, something that's happening inside of our own company, or given the political climate. Like, we would have real-time debates over what we were seeing in the data and what we were initially inclined to prioritize. Then we would settle on, okay, we're going to hone in on this subset of our list. These are the 5 companies, and I would then go away and do more of that research, engaging with SMEs, bringing them into the fold again on a more recurring basis than maybe I would otherwise do. It can be tough to establish this kind of a workflow because everyone is quite busy. Everyone is juggling multiple priorities, and even on the sales side, sales and marketing have that healthy tension, of course, but we're more or less always working toward the same set of targets, same KPIs. When it comes to engaging SMEs, like in legal and compliance or your head of product, my requests may not be at the top of their list, and they're likely not at the top of their list. Me adding something to the to-do list, that can be sometimes a hard sell, or that can be hard to work out. But this program really required me to refresh my content more in real time, seek more feedback. We created playbooks where we essentially had living documents of the copy of the proposed posts and scripts, and they would be edited on a almost daily basis based on intel that we were receiving from sales, recommendations from your team as well. So it was a really living, breathing workflow, which is maybe different from what some folks in content marketing are taught to do or are comfortable doing. I love a content calendar. I love seeing my month at a glance. I love knowing that X, Y, and Z is going out on this day. And sometimes, admittedly, it would freak me out when I checked LinkedIn and a different post had been moved to the top of the queue, and I thought that I'd maybe made a mistake or the wrong company was named. So we were constantly swapping things in, which ultimately was fun. Ultimately, I think it's a really important exercise, and it just reminds you that that's really what effective marketing should be, whether you're doing it inside of an ABM container or not, whether it's just a part of regular marketing. It's important to stay sharp and to really lean into that creative side of marketing, leaning on processes to execute and enable stuff. Process is important, but to also embrace a little bit more of that messy collaboration that was otherwise maybe missing just from other parts of my job for different reasons, workload alone.
I would love just to summarize what you have said and maybe give an idea for everybody who is listening to us, right? The key difference that I feel we can observe in, let's say, standard content strategy and ABM content, right, is that with the standard content strategy, you have the content calendar, you might be looking at SEMrush, prioritizing the keywords, thinking in terms of search engine optimization, what we need to write about. And also there is always product bias, right? Okay, I need to write about my product. I need to write about features. I need to write about these technical things. The problem, though, that occurs from it, right, is that the specific challenge our product solves could be just a tiny part of operations or jobs to be done of our target buyer persona, right? And that's why they kind of could perceive that specific challenge as a commodity challenge or like last minute thing, right? But in reality, that specific challenge could impact a lot the big process. So for example, in your case, they could think like background checks or whatever, right? It's just the last minute thing, but they don't think about candidates' experience. They don't think why the like hiring pipeline struggles, why they can't acquire talents, right? They can't connect the dots. And in ABM strategy, right, we basically flip the process, and instead of like what keyword is the best or what product feature would be the best to describe in the next blog post, we start thinking, okay, what could nurture my target buyer persona about this, let's say, jobs to be done that they are running on a daily basis, and they are not aware of the problems they are dealing and the root reasons behind these problems, right? This is one of the things. The second one, from the sales perspective, we have accounts that already know us, right? There is some level of relationship or engagement of vendor awareness. So we put another question: what can help us to motivate or to influence the current buyer journey stage so that account could consider us, right? So we can get into the consideration set. What can motivate this account to start talking to us, right? So these things. And yeah, in reality, that could look messy for everybody who prefers, like standard content calendar, etc. But like you said, and we always say, ABM program is not static, it's dynamic program. So you are doing a lot of things to influence a set of accounts, right? And definitely all accounts move at different velocity, right? You can't control it. You can, let's say, somehow influence it, but you are not controlling it. But then if one account demonstrates more intent or engagement, shouldn't you prioritize that account? It's obvious and it's logical, right? But a lot of teams ignore that fact. And we touched basically the one-on-one content, one-to-one content creation, right? And partially one-to-few. But I also mentioned this, let's say, cluster approach, talking to jobs to be done. And you did a lot of research, so I think it would be very beneficial if you'll also touch the areas. How do you research the communities to understand better the buyer persona? Questions you ask internal SMEs, right? I think that would be very beneficial for everybody to understand how to influence all of these accounts that don't know us, right? Literally, there is lack of of brand awareness inside these accounts, so we can attract their attention.
I'm glad you brought up the point about it's not always about you. I think that's helpful to highlight. It's like you're decentering yourself from the marketing process. And I think as marketers, if you ask the average person, of course, we're thinking about our audience. Of course, that's the best practice. But it is easy to fall into that habit of always starting your marketing initiative or campaign or idea from yourself as the center. So as you said, what do people need to understand about a background check, or what is the right order of running a background check? How do you create a background check policy? These are all valid questions to answer, and our clients certainly are interested in them in other capacities. But through this program, we zoomed out a lot and had to explore, okay, where does the background check really fall within the hiring process? Okay, it's the literal last step of onboarding. There are so many other things that our target buyer is interested in. So all of the work that we did was to uncover that and to test different hypotheses. We had some ideas about candidate experience and what was important to our tech audience, in part because we're a tech company and we share a lot of, those same values or that company ethos. I looked at a lot of threads. I looked at a lot of things that folks were saying, job candidates going through the hiring process. What are their frustrations on Reddit? What are they ranting about background checks? What's confusing to them? Putting myself in their minds. I've been on that side of things. I've hired, I get some of those challenges, but I think what was really helpful, to your point, Andre, was also engaging with our internal SMEs. So on the client success side, we chatted quite a bit with those folks to uncover, what are some common sticking points, not generally, but like specific to this audience. When we're thinking about tech companies, there are questions of integration. So should we be talking about our integration capabilities differently? I have one perception of why integration with HR platforms is valuable and helpful, but it was really through having these conversations with others and learning about some of the actual limitations, some of the sticking points that helped me reframe what version of an idea was more valuable. So there was a lot of testing and vetting that happened as part of those SME conversations. Our head of product, he has a completely different perspective on background checks and specific products and the questions that people are asking by virtue of the meetings that he's in. In other content that I produce, if I'm writing an SEO blog post, I'm running things by him to say, is this technically accurate? And he's like, yep, you didn't say anything incorrect there. Our legal and compliance team will say, nope, that is factually correct. But when you open up the conversation to engage them in a more open-ended way, as we did as part of our early brainstorming, I think that unearthed more of those insights that speak to that jobs to be done stuff. So I think also by zooming out and by putting aside some of what we thought and the way the brainstorming sessions were facilitated, the kinds of people that we engaged, again, head of client success, head of product, different people on our sales team, integration specialists, things of that nature. I think that made for a much more fruitful conversation about hiring more generally, and again, decentering ourselves.
I love it. And I always think about a stat that I read recently. There was a study done by Trust Radius and Pavilion about the new B2B buying process that was done recently last year. And one of the stats was that I think 83% of enterprise buyers will shortlist the vendor they discovered before they started the buying research, which just means that they were not buying, they were somehow their attention was attracted. But if they're not buying, if they're not concerned with, in your case, background checks, and you have to grab their attention, you can't be talking about the narrow topic that they could only be interested when they are buying, which goes back to actually we need to take a step back so that we can catch those 83%, which is obviously what we wanted to do, and help sales get in those accounts early enough. Now, it sounds like you did a lot. It sounds like next to everything that you were doing for your other content roles, you did a lot of research, you did a lot of, you were meeting every day, every week with the sales team. You were chatting with the subject matter experts. You were creating more content than before, et cetera, et cetera. And I think probably a lot of our audience is asking themselves, like, okay, but how much time? Let's be concrete. How much time should I actually expect to dedicate to an ABM program? And maybe you can also break it down if there is a difference, maybe at the start, once it's ramped up. How would you think about the time requirement for somebody who needs to create content?
Yeah, that's a great question. And perhaps I'll also look to you to weigh in, just given that you also help facilitate the setup process. I'll speak to my experience, but I might have a bit more of a limited view. In terms of like once it was up and running, I think I only spent about 6 to 10 hours per week on this program in particular. For some people, that might seem like an absurd amount of time. I actually think that is perhaps lower than what I may have expected from the outset, and that includes meetings. We did the upfront work to really define roles and responsibilities, which that is, as you know, often like a key to success in any program. So we were really clear on establishing and creating a playbook around every process. So it was super obvious who had to do what and when. I think that work up front, that's what then made it so that I was spending 6 to 10 hours per week. Meeting with SMEs, prepping notes for other tactics like our webinar, transcribing our webinar, repurposing that content into new social posts, into design assets. I fortunately had access to quite a few templates, so it was fairly straightforward for me to extract quotes or intel or insight from sales conversations to repackage those and repurpose them as digital assets that we then shared through social media and other channels. So 6 to 10 hours, maybe someone may want to budget 10 to 15 if they don't have the benefit of those processes established in the way that we did. Upfront, of course, there's always a lot more time upfront. I would say we probably spent about 20 hours doing those brainstorming sessions, doing those planning sessions, doing that kind of benchmark analysis. So where are we at now? What's the current state? Getting that buy-in from senior leadership. So doing those presentations, raising awareness within the company of, this is something we're piloting. It might seem new and unusual, but here's how it actually tracks with some of our broader business goals. So there's no doubt a bigger upfront requirement. On the content side, I would say 6 to 10 hours, but there's a requirement from sales as well that is probably more than that. And I can't really speak to how a salesperson's workflow needs to adjust because I think each person is different, but I just don't want to lose sight of I'm one part of the process. And maybe that's the whole spirit of this conversation, right? The content piece is a really key enabler, but what really makes a program successful is the effective collaboration between marketing and sales. So yeah, that's my answer for now, but maybe you have more insight.
No, that's awesome. We have a lot of questions from our community, so I would love us to cover all of these questions as we always promise to our live attendees.
Yeah.
But to wrap up what we have discussed today, I think everybody is always interested in the results, right? So how would you describe the key results and the impact on pipeline or revenue for Certn from the pilot program, considering that everything has been almost, in terms of ABM, everything was created from scratch? And then we'll move to the community question.
Of course. Yeah. So I think it's a pilot program. So let's first keep that in mind. Though the processes and workflows, even the ABM specific ones, have already influenced work that we're doing in Q1. So we have new initiatives and new programs underway. And just by virtue of doing this program and forcing deeper integration or like more in real time feedback conversations between marketing and sales, we're already set up for success, more so than had we not done this program. So from a process perspective, I think that's a huge win. As part of this program, we defined a narrative of candidate experience for our tech persona. We have a much better sense of which specific topics within the whole hiring process ecosystem resonate with people, what parts of background screening are interesting, and when to bring those in. I also feel like on the sales side, we have a much better rhythm or recipe or workflow for follow-up. There's always that standard, hey, did you get my email? Just following up on my email. Hey, did you want to book that demo? Like, yes, that is one way of engaging folks. But now we have this whole toolkit that we can use even outside of the ABM program, asking people to respond to survey questions, asking them which questions they want to hear in a webinar, and then promising to answer them in real time, engaging people to see if we can repurpose their comments from DM conversations or LinkedIn comments into digital assets, asking people for their opinion on their favorite HR products that we can include in a roundup. So I want to highlight the process piece because some people may think process is a little bit of a snore, but we work better as a team and have more creative ways of engaging prospective clients as an outcome of this program that we can use anytime, anywhere. At the closeout of the pilot, we had 84 target accounts in the pipeline, which is a lot for one person to manage. So of course, now that tiering, that figuring out what that next approach is instrumental if we don't scale the program. But we are looking at ways to scale the program and see now how that can influence how we work in other markets and what we can do between sales and marketing in the future. I believe there are 3 of the target accounts with sales opportunities in Q1, which again, for a B2B buying cycle is amazing. And that's also exciting. Those are 3 accounts that did not have us on their radar at the start of this program. So that's certainly a win in that respect. And I know we have questions to get to, but I'm really proud to highlight the webinar engagement. That tactic worked really well for us. It's not a hot take to run a webinar, and some people may even argue that like webinars are on their way out, but the average view time was something like people stayed on for an average of 53 minutes. Like that's almost unheard of these days. So to me, that really helped us validate that there was interest in that topic and that the nature of the conversation that we had, in our case, it was about a compliant social media screening program and how you may be inadvertently opening yourself up to risk doing it in other ways. There's something there that we are already planning to apply to other campaigns and other marketing programs, even outside of this ABM program. So yeah, we had a record number of webinar signups for a product specific webinar, and that engagement time was also record for us as well. So that was exciting to see.
As people say, the devil is always in detail, right? It's not the rocket science to run the webinar. It's just the rocket science to run a proper webinar that drives the pipeline, right? Yeah. And also just, I mean, sometimes people say, okay, but that's because you guys post a lot on LinkedIn, you have brand awareness, but like our recent webinar was flat about launching pilot ABM program in October last year, kept us here on the platform for 2 hours, 45 minutes, despite we finished the webinar in 55 minutes. And then it was like a long queue of questions. And even despite this, at that mark, 2 hours, 45 minutes, we had around 150 people staying with us live, which was insane, right? And it's question about how you position it, what you cover on this webinar, what value you deliver, right? And how that helps your business and how it helps your buyers. So I think this is this is the most important, and your case is the best proof that that is not relevant to marketing space. Or basically, we are not also in generic or broad marketing space, right?
Yeah.
It's very narrow niche. The same is your case, which is like social media screening. I mean, it's a very specific niche topic, but just because it resonated a lot, your target buyer persona, your target buyers actually stayed with you. I think it's a perfect time to move to the community questions. So what would be the order, Vlad? First game, first
I think I'd like to raise this one because we have just spoken about it. We have spoken about one type of content and channel, let's say, that gave the best results. So I think to wrap this up, it would be interesting to, other than the webinar, how would you answer this question? What channels did you see best results through with the ABM content?
So we leaned into, perhaps in part just because it was a pilot, we leaned into what was already working for us or where we had the biggest presence. So we primarily focused on LinkedIn. So it wasn't anything really more complex than that. Of course, there were, some email communications, and we had some post-webinar follow-up tactics with landing pages and things like that. But I think it's a testament. It's a testament to the fact that you can keep it simple and still see results.
I love it. And just sorry, wanted to ask a very related question to wrap up, because you're not talking about LinkedIn, and Lance asked a question about LinkedIn. So that's why I wanted to highlight this question before we move on to another topic. So what Lance was asking, you're creating content for LinkedIn, but I think it's also important to stress for people who might be just listening, we're not just talking about content for LinkedIn that is shared via LinkedIn page or maybe using ads and promoting like that. But actually, the majority of content was shared via our salesperson personal profile. Some of that was also promoted through thought leadership ads, just to be a little bit more precise there. Now, we have an interesting question also from Lance. Okay, so we do have the salesperson and their LinkedIn profile, and they're using that content to connect to the target buyers, et cetera, et cetera. But what about marketing professionals who are leveraging LinkedIn to build those relationships before passing the account to sales outreach? Now, I know that we might have not done a lot of that during the initial program, but I also happen to know that as we are now working on the next steps and scaling this, I know that one of our team members, a marketer, is actually taking that role on. So maybe you can give your answer to this question.
Yeah, I think especially in the case of developing something new or launching a pilot, it's always best to keep it as simple as possible. And it made sense for us, given the nature of our business and how we typically sell, to start with sales. We really wanted to build up the profile of the sales team, and still want to. Perhaps there are other businesses where marketing is closer to your target buyer, or maybe they are your buyer. So in that case, of course, that might make sense to start with marketing. So we started with sales because it was part of another initiative within our company, and it's more close to how folks buy. But as Vlad mentioned, we are now, as part of a broader program, branching out. And I think it's in part because we saw success doing this pilot. So when you start to generate those wins, you can then get that buy-in from other folks on the team, where it's a bit easier to facilitate those conversations and requests.
Love it. By the way, I saw already.
Go ahead.
Yeah. I just wanted to say I already saw a few comments, and people were saying a huge thank you, Alan, for fantastic insights. that the episode was helpful. And I was wondering, let us know, guys, how was this episode for you? Was it good? Did you learn something new? Let us just share with us some feedback in the chat while we are covering other questions.
Yeah, and I'm happy to dig in. Like, if people have any specific questions for me, like the nitty gritty of what it's really like, I'm happy to answer those as well.
Okay, Vlad, you wanted to say something? Sorry, I just interrupted you.
Go ahead. Yeah. No.
Okay, so that was another question from David, and he was wondering if we were targeting enterprises. So the answer is yes. And all of these enterprises, I bet some of these companies you use quite, the products of these companies you guys use quite regularly, especially when booking the trips. So, but let's cover this question. What's the size bracket you targeted with the ABM campaign?
Yeah, I think like obviously there's that association with it being enterprise focused, which is true, but we're also dealing with the reality of an ever-changing dynamic startup. So there were instances where we decided to skew a bit more mid-market to take advantage of some opportunities that we were seeing. So going back to how we were opening the conversation about ABM being more in real time, responsive, dynamic, that was a decision that we made based on the data that we were seeing and shifting business priorities as well. It was really important for us to showcase certain wins or showcase certain results. So given that, we to kind of shorten that buying cycle and to we switched up our strategy to encompass a bit more mid-market.
Yeah, mid-market, still a couple of thousand people in headcount, to give it a little bit more precise example. So for the folks in Europe, when we talk about mid-market in the US, it's always a bit larger than what we might be used to here in Europe. Now, I think we spoke about the time that you have spent, but I think there are a couple of questions that I see about being in a small team, right? And there's one interesting question from Nicole. Should you even start ABM strategy if you're a team of one marketer, one salesperson, wearing 10 hats already? You were in a little bit of different position, but still, we did this pilot with a relatively small team. So what would be your advice to Nicole?
Well, first of all, I'll say anything that I worked on as part of the ABM program, I've been able to repurpose in other work. So it wasn't so siloed. It's actually quite easy to take something hyper specific and roll it up to more people. Arguably, that's the better way to approach creating marketing content, right? So on that end, I think it certainly makes sense. I think it's a matter of setting expectations within the company, within your team, within management. I think you need that clearance or that coverage to maybe experiment, to take the time to come up with a strategy and come up with the workflows. I was really fortunate that we had that alignment, that we had that buy-in from our executive team. And when it came down to those conversations about prioritization or the sales team was stretched, we needed to meet Q4 targets, things like that, we were able to have more productive conversations about adjusting things and changing expectations. So I think provided that you do your due diligence and get the requisite buy-in, that can be helpful. But yeah, go for it. I don't think there's any harm in doing that kind of research and decentering your marketing. I think it only will benefit you.
And I already saw some feedback from Jessica Selle with the insights, which are fantastic, guys. Thanks a lot for sharing the takeaway about the centering yourself from the messaging, the nitty-gritty details on the content planning. So that was fantastic. I would appreciate a lot, guys, if you can give us 5 stars on iTunes or Spotify. I dropped the links in the chat. Would be very helpful. And we have 3 last questions to cover. So maybe let's quickly go through them. What content type do you see the best performing?
Again, we were kind of limited in what we did. So I think the webinar, certainly I already expressed how I thought that was a win. But there were some LinkedIn posts where we employed tactics that Fullfunnel recommended of tagging others. We made posts and tagged folks who were already having conversations with our sales team in LinkedIn DMs. So there was already that kind of built-in engagement, and they were proud to comment on those posts. I would say that was probably one of our most productive tactics. I really liked that one, and it's certainly something that I think we should do in the future, because often you press publish on a LinkedIn post and then you cross your fingers that engagement will happen, or you maybe back channel on Slack and beg your colleagues to engage with the content, which has merit. But if you can leverage an existing conversation, I think that's just great.
I love that you mentioned that as well. So in addition to the distribution part of it, also just opening up new conversations for your sales folks. They can, using content collaboration, asking those questions, you get from the source input, basically buyer generated content. What's better than that, right? Being able to showcase their insights in your content. But at the same time, the salesperson is getting that opportunity to have a conversation and get some insider insight potentially into that account. What's important to them? What are their challenges, etc. So I think you're absolutely right to highlight that. Now, I have a juicy question from David, and I hope you're gonna give us some juicy insights here.
Oh gosh,
what was the biggest challenge or a conflict between marketing and sales during the ABM process?
Oh, that's funny. I think there's always healthy tension between sales and marketing. I mentioned beforehand, you know what, actually, I find it more challenging sometimes to get SMEs on side, or to showcase the value of what you're doing for SMEs to help them find the time to help you. A real practical challenge doing anything, launching a new program in Q4 is quite ambitious, especially as that pressure dials up to meet year-end targets. So toward the end, we definitely encountered some challenges with prioritization. Going back to what I said before about buy-in, I think we were able to have more productive conversations about what we would scale back, who would step in and do the task this week when the salesperson wasn't available. I think we were able to have conversations about that in a more productive way because we'd already set those expectations from the outset and we had executive buy-in. Like, it wasn't a surprise to our head of sales that we were doing this program. But yeah, that prioritization was definitely a challenge, because when that drops off and there isn't a stopgap, or you don't pick it back up, I think you then very quickly can lose the rhythm, you lose that trust, you lose that buy-in, and then you run the risk of it being just another campaign that didn't work out. So it was really critical when that happened, when our salesperson said, hey, actually, I can't do this level of engagement that we planned, or hey, this week I don't have time for this. We were able to have conversations about how other people participating in the program on the marketing end could step in and bridge that gap.
Awesome. Thank you. We have actually the last question before finishing, so let's cover this coming from Lance. Could you also provide examples of digital assets you extracted from the insights from your prospects and responses? I mean, partially we have covered this already, but
just to be a bit more explicit. So when folks who are a part of our target account list left comments on the LinkedIn post that our salesperson made, or when they made a comment that was particularly juicy or insightful inside of a DM conversation, our sales rep, Sam, he would feed those to us, and we would turn them into quote blocks and integrate those comments and quotes into content that was coming down the pipeline, so we could further that conversation and showcase both parties as experts. So that's one example. So I had a template for a quote, and I would just plug in a quote and a headshot with the person and their title. And when someone is profiled in that way, they're often happy to share it and engage with it. So that's how we built in the engagement piece there. And then Vlad and Andre have a process that they call a content collaboration. So one example of that, of one that we did in the HR space, is that we polled internal SMEs and folks that we were engaging with as part of our account engagement on what some of their favorite HR tools are, so that we could make the ultimate HR tech stack. And we tagged those accounts, we tagged those tools, we even sprinkled in some of our long-term partners to kind of bring in other parts of the business. So that was another digital asset that we created. We created like an actual little image associated with that LinkedIn post, so that could also be shared.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Guys, sorry for not covering all other questions that you were dropping in the chat because we're already out of time. So first of all, appreciate fantastic attendance and all of the questions. And Ellen, of course, thank you so much for not only for helping us to basically run a successful ABM program, but also for joining us live today and covering all of these questions that we have prepared at our community. Also share it in the chat and in the sign-up forums.
Perfect. Yeah, thanks so much. Thank you for all of your help. I'm certainly excited to continue our work in 2025 and to grow and to evolve some of these workflows and some of these ideas. So thank you.
I appreciate it. And for you guys, that was a question. We host this live podcast every Wednesday, same time. So stay tuned. You'll receive an email on Monday with the next topic and sign up link. Thank you so much, everybody, and have a fantastic rest of the week. Cheers.
Bye.